Hello and welcome to MSL Learn. My name is Akanksha and I am an urban designer working with WRI. I, with my colleagues Chetan and Dhawal, present to you the last module of the series, COVID-19 Responsive Street Design. You might remember this picture from the previous module, which shows our efforts in the past. In the last 2 decades, we have built large infrastructure projects like freeways, highways, flyovers, and we all know what that has led to. We ended up spending more money and having more vehicles on the road. And while that happened, we not only increased congestion and air pollution on our streets, we also ended up posing a major risk to the life of the vulnerable users on the street. I hope you remember who these vulnerable users are. Pedestrians, cyclists, elderly, physically challenged. The good thing, however, is that we've seen how a change in approach and some conscious efforts in design can help address these issues. I hope by now we all can agree on 3 things. One, that it is crucial for us now to shift our approach from designing roads for cars to streets for people. We also know that it is important to design streets for all users because it not only improves the safety of our streets, but also the efficiency. And we know that there is a process by which we can design our streets and junctions. Now that these are clear, we must understand all of this with respect to the current situation. In this module, we will understand how COVID affects our day-to-day mobility and why there is need for a thoughtful response. We'll also see what cities and governments have done globally and nationally as a response to these challenges. And we'll also see how we can turn this crisis into an opportunity for a better future using the principles and the elements that we learned in the previous module. Let me begin by addressing the current situation in our cities in the wake of the pandemic. With daily cases rising each day and some experts saying that we might witness a second wave too, the COVID situation is highly unpredictable. But even though the situation is highly unpredictable, let's make a few reasonable assumptions which we all can agree on. Now we know that we will have to live with this for at least another year, if not more. Hence, we all will have to learn to live with what is being called as the new normal. Now, what is this new normal? Proper hand hygiene, wearing masks, physical distancing, and avoiding crowding. Which means that our public transport will not be able to function at the full capacity as it did before the COVID situation. But people will move, right? We cannot continue staying in the state of lockdown. Hence, people will step out. Some of us who can work from home may continue to do so. But those whose livelihood depends on going out, they will have to go out. And also, the people who are working from home, they'll need to step out at some point, right? Maybe for groceries or for medicals or for any other emergency, but very, very importantly, for a breath of fresh air outside. We all want a small walk or a quick jog outside our homes to enjoy a good physical and mental health. And some recent developments in medical science also suggest that the risk of catching the infection outdoors is much lesser than in indoor spaces, and more so in spaces which have poor ventilation. Such studies have in some ways reinforced people's belief that going out is safe. So what can be concluded from all of this is very, very clear. People need to and will move. But the question is, how do they move safely? To understand that, let us look at how people moved before the COVID situation. Now, you've already seen this, but let me show you again the modal split for Greater Mumbai as per the Comprehensive Mobility Plan of 2014. Now, let us keep aside these walk trips for a moment and look at the motorized modal split. As we all can see, around 67% of the people in Mumbai use public transport pre-COVID. Also, around 80 lakh people use the Mumbai local to travel every day before the pandemic hit the city. But the question is, how do they move now? Obviously, these numbers are pre-COVID and are likely to change with respect to the current situation. But As many parts of our city are opening up gradually with the mission Begin Again, imagine even if 50% of these people decide to or have to travel. How do they do it? Clearly, mass transit, which is buses and trains and metros, are not an option for many. Why? One, because the capacity is reduced. But secondly, because people are fearful. There is definitely a perceived risk which is associated with traveling with so many people together. So how do people move or rather have started moving? We can all agree the private mode of commute is perceived much safer than the public one. So let's assume that all of these people who had to travel start using their private vehicles to commute. While it is clearly not possible for everyone to own a private vehicle, some recent studies have shown a surge in the sales of the two-wheelers since the COVID-19 situation. So let's just assume that all of these people who had to travel start using their private vehicles to commute. What do you think would happen? While you think that, let me show you a recent picture of Mumbai, which saw traffic lining up on the Sion Panvel highway within a day of the partial relaxation of the lockdown. Imagine what would happen once the restrictions are completely lifted. What if this road were to accommodate more cars or more two-wheelers? It simply cannot. We all see there is no space. More vehicles here on this road would only mean more congestion and larger travel times. So then what do we do? Now there are two ways to address this growing demand. The first way is to expand the infrastructure, meaning that we build more roads for more vehicles. But the question is, can we? While we may have the budget and workforce to do this, do we have the space to build more roads in our city? And even if we did have this space, the COVID situation presents us with a larger challenge, which is that of the time. Let's not forget that the time that we take to construct more roads in our city is also the time that we'll have lesser road space. For example, if we take a year to plan and build a few more roads in our city, for that full 1 year, we'll have to deal with a reduced carriageway capacity. We all know planning and construction of transport infrastructure takes time, and the demand to move people is now. But let us just say that we somehow manage the time and space challenge. What will we get by adding more roads? More cars, increased congestion, larger travel times, more crashes, and most importantly, we'll end up further reducing the footpath space, hence squeezing more people towards the edge, which will not be safe again because the physical distancing would become even more impossible. Hence, this may not be the right way to think about it. Now, one thing is clear so far, that more people need to move by road and the space available to do so is the same as before. So what is the solution for a situation like this? Let us recall a fundamental that we learned in the previous module, which is that streets are not just conduits for traffic. Streets are public spaces. And once we start to understand this, the solution will come very simply to us, which is that we need to design our streets efficiently with high priority to non-motorized modes of mobility. And you know, cities across the globe have already started doing this. And we'll also see, once we start to understand streets as public spaces, we not only solve the issue of moving more people, but also that of the economy and the recreation. We saw previously that people will need to go out to enjoy a good physical and mental strength. And if everyone decides to go to the parks or beaches that we have in our city, it won't be safe anymore, since more crowding will mean that the risk of spreading the virus will be more. Hence, we need spaces for daily recreation, which are not only safe to go, but also take less travel time. And what better spaces than our streets? Also, since crowding indoors is perceived risky, streets provide the wonderful opportunity to host certain activities like dining, shopping, markets on them. Hence, streets can be key drivers in reviving the hard-hit economy. With this, we know that our streets will have to cater to the needs of mobility, recreation, and economy. It is only a matter of designing and proper utilization of the available space. In the next section, my colleague Chetan will show you how some cities across the world have successfully responded to these challenges and needs.
Thank you, Akanksha. So now, before diving directly into global responses, we need to know that almost every city in the world went through different degrees of lockdown, some very strict, but some not. But in the end, everyone slowly realized that people will have to go out, may it be for buying essentials or to grab some fresh air, or even cultural celebrations, or just for casual eating. But the challenge remains how? The solution was found in design. Design focusing on making it safe for people to move around, providing safety by design. Like the extended footpath, providing more space for people to walk, maintaining the social distance. The temporary cycle lanes, just creating some space for cyclists as cycles automatically ensure social distancing. The slow or shared streets, where by slowing the speeds of vehicles, local small streets were made safe for walking. Open streets, where for some time in the day, neighborhood streets are closed for walking. Safe junctions, with community participation making it safe for pedestrians to cross. And the open dining streets and market streets just to revive the economy. These simple design strategies used to help people move around the city, maintaining social distance. So there was some data gathered from around the world, and mapping almost all of them, it was clearly seen that temporary cycle lanes and open streets were the most widely accepted responses. Now let's see how these design tools were used by cities all around the world. The first example is from Barcelona in Spain. So what did Barcelona do? The city understood people may want to opt for personal vehicles, but having too many cars out on streets was not a suitable option as it may lead to congestion. As study shows, cycling automatically ensures social distancing. The focus was then to move people by widening footpaths and making as many cycle lanes as possible. The city officials planned for a street network where they proposed widening of footpaths and temporary cycle lanes. Apart from that, city also identified some arterial streets, of which more than 50% was temporarily restricted only for walking and cycling purposes during the lockdown. Then, as there was short of time and no immediate funds were available, Barcelona city officials chose to implement these proposals with low cost and fast measures. That means by using just paint and cones, etc., normally known as tactical measures. This was also good to test the designs before doing permanent construction, as we saw in our previous module, where some junctions were tried out before the final implementation. Barcelona was able to implement this large plan just overnight. The implementation of footpath and cycle lanes on 21 kilometers of street was done just overnight, and that too with very less budget. These fast implementations help for maximum mobility within the same existing ROW of the roads. This is the New York City. They faced the challenge of recreation during the lockdown. We now know that during lockdown, staying at home over a long period can lead to mental health issues. The citizens of New York started writing to the government to access to parks and gardens during the lockdown. But the city knew if it allowed, it would lead to crowding. We can relate to this as even Mumbai has huge population, and if allowed, the beaches and gardens will surely face overcrowding. New York knew that it cannot build parks and gardens as it takes months and sometimes even years. So the city announced its Walk NYC plan. The idea was to treat streets as public space like parks or gardens. This could provide immediate public spaces for people with no time, with no major investment would be needed. This plan was created by city engineers with active feedback from local communities. Online forms were circulated with questions like which locations do you prefer? From when to when can the streets be closed? Which days of the week it's fine for such closures? Also asking if people, the citizens themselves, could provide any help to manage this plan. And finally, almost 160 kilometers of streets were open to people. As we see in the images, all of this was done just with the help of painting and barricading. The 100 kilometers of streets that were next to large open public spaces like parks and gardens were closed from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. as received in the feedback from people. The other 60 kilometers for temporary cycle tracks and widened footpaths for safe mobility. Most of you may have seen this image. It was viral in India. This actually is the Kalau city in Myanmar. It sets a very good example showing how markets can still run, helping people to buy daily necessities and also reviving the economy with maintaining social distance. Here, the city demarcated spaces for vendors and shopkeepers on some of its streets. These selected streets were closed for traffic. This was a very simple and cost-effective design solution and also was easily replicable to many parts of the city. This city is Tel Aviv in Israel. The city was experiencing huge economic losses during the lockdown. The city wanted to revive the economy and provide some social recreation for its citizens. So they identified 11 streets having restaurants on the ground floor, which were shorter than 2 kilometers. As we know now that it is much safe outdoors than indoors, the restaurants were asked to pull more than 50% of their seatings outside on the street. The spaces used by restaurants were mostly parking spaces, and in some smaller streets, the vehicle thoroughfare was closed from 8 a.m. to 11 p.m. This simple idea of the outdoor seating allowed for safe social distancing and also helped to activate the city economy. These cities tried to face challenges through very simple and effective design solutions, which were not only quick, but were also very cost efficient. But there are some cities that are using this pandemic and lockdown as an opportunity to take a leap forward towards long-term and better sustainable solution. For example, this is how Paris looked before lockdown. But Paris is using this pandemic as a trigger to achieve its goal of 15-minute city. Even before the onset of pandemic, the city had started working on the concept of 15-minute city, where it was trying to provide all urban facilities within just 15 minutes of walking and cycling distances, including work, education, and even healthcare. But how? To begin with, Paris announced Car-Free City Center initiative, where first Sunday of every month, the city center will be open only for walking and cycling from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. The city center now looks like this on car-free Sundays. The idea was to get people used to walking and cycling for their daily activities. The city is motivating its residents to choose cycle and walk over cars. Residents have already started enjoying the move and are looking forward to the 15-minute city. This is Bogota in Colombia, a Latin American city. It has an extensive network of bus rapid transit system, that is BRTS, which is used heavily, similar to our Mumbai local. In Bogota, almost 24 lakh people use BRTS on daily basis. The city had foreseen that post-lockdown, BRTS system will have to run at very low efficiency, and hence there was a strong need for alternative mode of transport. The aim was to move people maintaining social distance without leading to congestion, as cycle automatically ensures social distancing. It was considered as an alternative mode of transport for BRTS as well as cars. But how did they do that? Then, taking advantage of lockdown, the city extended its existing 550 kilometers of network of cycle track by 117 kilometers in just one night. But how? The city first mapped the routes heavily used by essential workers and added new cycle lanes on these routes for easy and safe movement of these workers. These newly created cycle tracks were open from 6 a.m. to 7:30 p.m. every day, covering the peak movement times. Bogota is promoting cycle as an alternative mode of transport and is also using this pandemic as an opportunity to motivate people to choose walking and cycling over the traditional motor vehicles. National responses. Now, it's not that India is not doing anything. In India also, there are some good examples that are changing the focus from moving cars to moving people. Like in Maharashtra, around 2 months back with the mission Begin Again, it circulated a notification that clearly mentioned and encouraged people to use cycle as a form of physical exercise and movement, as it automatically ensures social distancing. And Kolkata, on the other hand, has shifted from banning cycles to allowing them on their city streets. Cycles literally became saviors. It helped a lot of people to move around in the city. Also in June 2020, the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs announced this nationwide circular to revive and encourage non-motorized transport. It also provides detailed short-term and long-term strategies for widening of footpath and creating new cycle tracks in our cities. The ministry also launched the Cycles for Change Challenge. It aims to inspire and support 100 cities in India to help urban mobility by promoting cycle and cycle-friendly initiatives in Indian cities as a response to COVID. Look at Bangalore city. It announced a pop-up cycle lane project and now even a network with Bangalore Municipal Corporation and DULT. Bangalore has started promoting cycle as a mode of transport throughout the city. Many other Indian cities are also started to take such similar initiatives. Now let me hand it over to my colleague Dhawal, who will show us the way forward for Indian cities like Mumbai. Over to you, Dhawal.
Hello again, everyone. And thank you, Chetan and Akanksha, for that wonderful presentation so far. I wanted to sort of end this 5-part series with, first of all, thanking you all for sort of going through it. And I hope that it has been useful to you. All of these videos are going to be with you. We will also send the presentation decks, and you all have our contacts. So if there's anything, please feel free to reach out to us anytime. What I wanted to end with, and now having looked at sort of some of the global responses that have happened, can we turn this COVID crisis into an opportunity? An opportunity to make the streets of our city better, more accessible, safer for every individual. There is perhaps not a better time to do this. It's not like there was never another better time, but if we have to do this right now with a sense of urgency, how do we do that? Before we get into that, I wanted to offer just one more example. And this is not during COVID, this is from the past. This street is a street in the city of New York. It's called the Queens Boulevard. Back in the early 90s, this used to be called as the Boulevard of Death. Since 1990, about 186 people have been killed on this one street, of which about 38 were pedestrians. So the city decided to do something about it. After 97, what the city did is that first they acknowledged that this is not acceptable. Then they decided to put in certain measures. So after 97, they adjusted signal timings. They made some curb extensions. We've seen curb extensions in our presentation so far. They made the medians more wide. They put in protective barriers and crosswalks, which is crossings, and cameras were installed. They even removed 2 lanes. All of this was obviously done to make it much safer for pedestrians because that was the most vulnerable group. But in 2013, when they saw that the deaths have significantly reduced but not become zero, they were like, this is not enough. So after 2013, they reduced the speeds to 25 miles per hour. They introduced bike lanes, so bicycle lanes, and lanes were again redesigned to make it much more safer. And the results are for all of us to see now. Queens Boulevard is no longer the Boulevard of Death. There has been no recorded pedestrian or cyclist killed in a road traffic crash since 2014. It's possible. It's possible in a city like New York. It's possible everywhere. It's not like in our city we don't have good examples, but this was worth sharing. This used to be LBS Mark before. LBS Mark, I'm not sure if all of us are aware, but it used to consistently record the highest number of fatalities in the city. Just between 2013 and 2015, about 40 people had died and several had gone through grievous injuries on this LBS Marg only. 80% were pedestrians. This is a before and after proposal for LBS Marg. Now there is a metro here, so this proposal is probably not the most timely. But the point is that there are some elements in the proposed layout that just make it simpler for pedestrians and streamline movement for vehicles. It is overall a much safer atmosphere. Is this possible? There are many issues. I'm not saying we can overnight change this. You know, we have a whole underground world of utilities, of chambers, of sewage lines, and all of those things. But we need to get here. That's the question. And what we need to ask ourselves is how. We should acknowledge that the existing layout in the way it was is not and should not be acceptable. Let's just look at some other images. This is Linking Road in Bandra. I am sure a lot of you must have seen where this is, but this is a nice wide road. There is a good footpath on the side. There is one person on the footpath, but there are two people, if you see ahead, walking on the street. This person very likely will go ahead and come on the street. It's because of footpath continuity lacking. Can we reimagine this into something like this? Let's say we don't even think of a cycle track. Even if we have to make it sort of much safer and more vibrant, we will have to, especially in COVID, right, widen the footpath a little. It's not going to affect traffic. We know. Just look at this. The concrete part is where the main vehicles move. We want to ensure contiguity. Remember in module 3, contiguous lane width, the little tempo there and the little space outside the tempo is space that is used regularly for several purposes, but the traffic moving. Reimagine this. We are in 2020. It is so unacceptable right now that a footpath built with so much hard work, money, and effort is consistently blocked by things such as a gate move coming outside. This is not just one local incident, right? All of us are aware this happens across the city. Little ahead of the gate, you see a bus stop. The bus stop blocks the entire footpath. What is the point of this? We need to rethink. One possibility is this, but there is no one right. What is right is to ensure continuity in the footpath and contiguity on the lane. How can we do that? This is SV Road. Again, a newly built footpath, as you can see on the right. Just a little ahead is a bus stop. I'm not sure you can fully see, but before the bus stop is that red box. It makes sure that the people start walking on the street. Can we reimagine it like this? It's possible. I mean, even if you don't think of a cycle track, think of a wider footpath or just a safer cycling space for people. So I'd like to end this 5 series module with sort of a few, and I hope these are questions that are important to us, that we can think about, is that how can we get from where we are to making everything accessible? Can we ensure every refuge island to be more universally accessible? Can we ensure that across the property gates, the footpath is continuous and on the same grade? Can we ensure that every mid-block crossing is protected in some way or the other? Can we ensure every junction is safer? Can we ensure that every street, to the extent possible, has a carriageway that is just contiguous and not 2 lanes, 3 lanes, 2 lanes and all that? Can we ensure these changes that seem relatively simple, but I understand that there are many more challenges that come in the way of getting these done. But yeah, with this, we would just like to end this 5-part series. Thank you very much for going through this. I would sincerely urge that you all fill the feedback form that has been shared with you. It will help us assess and create other modules that will be more useful in the future. What we are also planning is to bring to you some stories from across the world told by experts from those respective cities. And we hope that that will be useful to you also. Please feel free to share any feedback outside of the feedback form. You have our numbers, just call or message any of us and tell us any feedback that you may have with this. But thank you very much for going through these modules, and I hope they've been useful. Thank you.